Okay, so this is page 6 of the online test administration manual. So on page 6 is where we start looking at testing with accessibility supports. Now, tomorrow or Friday is the last day to upload any documents into TAA if you're requesting accommodations for students. But let's look at page 6. So on page 6, testing with accessibility supports, accommodations. Accommodations are available only for examinees when documented in an IEP or a 504 plan and are authorized in advance by ACT. These accommodations must be used regularly in the academic environment and should not be introduced just prior to taking the ACT. Examinees with the same testing times should test together as a group unless an accommodation requires one-to-one testing. Examples of accommodations include, but are not limited to, first bullet, timing, scheduling supports, such as extra testing time, testing over multiple days, breaks as needed. Audio supports, such as pre-recorded audio, human reader using a reader's script, text to speech. Response supports, such as scribe to record responses, speech to text software for the writing test. And remember, we don't do the writing test on the state testing in Louisiana. Authorization. For the ACT test, the Test Accommodations Coordinator, TAC, identifies and authorizes the use of universal supports and designated supports. The TAC identifies and requests authorization for examinees to test with accommodations based on their individualized education plan, or IEP, or 504 plan. EL supports based on limited English proficiency. All right, so now let's look at the timing codes and guidelines. Each examinee has an authorized timing code. This determines which verbal instructions must be read to that examinee. To schedule testing for an examinee, refer to the Accommodations and Supports roster, which lists each examinee's authorized timing and accommodations materials kit. Okay, so at this point, let me remind you how to get the Accommodations and Supports roster. If you recall, that was one of the tasks you had to complete for seniors up until this point. You will do the same task for juniors when the state uploads the juniors using the SDU file. But let me remind you where to get the Accommodations and Support roster. So you're going to go to PA Next, and then under Reports, you're going to go to Operational Reports. When you go to Operational Reports, if this is not already checked off, you're going to check off Students and Registrations right here. And then you're going to go here. That's that first one listed, Accommodations and Supports roster. When you click on Accommodations and Support roster, probably what's going to happen is you're going to see this first. So just make sure your school name is here and it says the ACT. Don't put it, we don't do ACT with writing, and we don't do ACT writing only. So make sure it says the ACT. And for accommodation status, leave it like you see it right here. Leave it blank. Don't put retrieved or opt out. Just go ahead and include every accommodation status. Then you're going to go ahead and refresh report. And see this 2 arrows right here? Up here says your report request has been submitted. Check back in a few minutes. It doesn't take very long. Let's just click on refresh right here. And notice it's ready to download. So I'm going to go ahead and download the report. is going to open at the bottom left, and so I'm going to go ahead and open it. All right, and so when you open it, you're going to get this spreadsheet. Now I did delete all this information here, so the student's information would not be visible, and I deleted the TAPN number for that student. But what I want you to notice, though, is that for each of those students listed, the timing code is visible. So notice that almost all of the students, except for maybe one of them, this one here, has timing code 6. And this one has timing code 3. So this is what they're referring to when they indicate go and obtain the Accommodations and Supports roster. Okay, so now you'll see in the table, it says to see which test timings apply to each timing code, see chart below. So notice that if you look at the spreadsheet, timing code 6 and then timing code 3. Notice, I want you to notice though, under column L, which is other approvals, this particular student right here that has timing code 6 also has modular acoustics. So that's probably an amplifier. So that student would need to test by himself, since there's an amplifier that would need to be used with that student. Okay, but notice that it doesn't indicate, this spreadsheet does not indicate the amount of extended time or how many days. So you need to go to this table and see what each of those timing code means. So timing code 1 is standard time. Timing code 2 is double time over multiple days. Timing code 3 is triple time over multiple days. Timing code 5 is, and there are 2 timing code 5s. One, though, is standard time over multiple days, and the other is breaks as needed. Now, it's very important you understand that if you have a timing code 5 that is breaks as needed, that is all in one day. All in one day. And the number of breaks cannot exceed 90 minutes. The amount of breaks cannot exceed 90 minutes. Timing code 6 is 1 1/2 time. Timing code 7 is 1 1/2 time over multiple days. We do not use timing code 8 because that is with the writing section only, and we don't do writing. Let's go to page 7. So there are a couple of things you need to remember or make sure you understand about some of these timing codes, especially with regards to online testing. The first paragraph, multiple day testing would be timing code 2, timing code 3, timing code 5, multiple day testing, and timing code 7. Remember, timing code 5, there were 2 of them, right? So I'm going back to it. There are 2. Timing code 5, there was standard time over multiple days and breaks as needed. Those are 2 different situations. Let's go back to page 7. Multiple day testing would be timing code 2, timing code 3, timing code 5, multiple day testing, and timing code 7 will occur over several days of the accommodations testing window. However, each test must be completed during a single session. The days do not have to be consecutive. Single day testing would include timing code 1 and timing code 5, breaks as needed, timing code 6, and timing code 8. All occur in one day, and all tests must be completed in a single session. All examinees in the room must have the same authorized timing. Examinees testing with accommodations may not test in a standard time room. If they do, tests from that room will not be scored or scores will be canceled. If you are administering ACT, no writing, we're going to skip the writing test section of each timing code and ignore timing code 8. In the verbal instructions for each timing code at the end of test 4, you will receive clear instructions on how to conclude your administration. The next bolded paragraph, I'm going to go ahead and raise the page, is important. When testing with accessibility supports, examinees may use less time than allowed with their authorized timing. Do not move to the next test until the standard time has expired and all examinees in the room have completed that test section or the allotted time has expired. Now listen to this carefully, and this is what this means. So let's look at timing code 6, which is what most of these students have. Timing code 6. All right, so timing code 6 is 1.5 time single day. So test 1, remember, is the ELA test, is the English test. Test 1 is the English test. For timing code 6, that student is allowed 70 minutes. Okay? This bolded information says this. You cannot move to test number 2, unless all the students have utilized at least 45 minutes, because that's the standard time, and all have completed the test within 70 minutes. So let's paraphrase this another way. Suppose there are 6 students in this session, and all 6 students finish the test in, let's say, 40 minutes, less than 40 minutes, 40 minutes or less. Are you able to move to test number 2? So let me say it again. All students, let's say there are 6 students, all 6 students finished, and they have timing code 6, all 6 students in timing code 6 finished the test in 40 minutes, test number 1, in 40 minutes. Are you able to move on to the next test? The answer is no. You cannot move on until the next test, and here's in the bold paragraph where it says that. Do not move on to the next test until the standard time has expired and all examinees in the room have completed that test section or the allotted time has expired. So if all 6 students completed the test in 40 minutes or less, you have to wait 5 more minutes, because that's 45 minutes for test 1. You have to wait 5 more minutes before you can move to test number 2. Okay? All right, now for timing code 6, there is no issue between timing code 2 and timing code 3 because there's a break, right? But let me say this about timing code 2 as well with regards to this paragraph. All right, so remember the test 2 is the math test. Test 2 is math. For timing code 6, the maximum amount of time allowed is 90 minutes. You cannot move on, or you cannot go to break. You cannot go to break until all of the students have completed the test and more than 60 minutes has expired. So you have to wait until at least 60 minutes has expired and all the students have finished the test before you can go to break. The maximum allowed time for test number 2 for timing code 6 is 90 minutes. If you have 6 students in timing code 6, let's say, and all 6 students finished the test in, let's say, 45 minutes. Can you go to break? The answer is no. You have to wait another 15 minutes before you can go to break, because you must, it says do not, up here, let's go back to the paragraph, do not move to the next test until standard time has expired and all examinees in the room have completed that test section or allotted time has expired. Now it does say test. I would assume that would apply for the break as well. So that's what I'm assuming, because it does say do not move to the next test. It doesn't say break, but I'm assuming it would be that as well. Okay, and the reason for that is because they want to make sure that no students are rushed to complete this test. Give them as much time as possible that's allotted to them. All right, so let's go back to this timing chart now. So authorized timing. So here's your timing code. Timing code 1, remember, is standard time, single day. And here are the allotted times. So test number 1 is English, 45 minutes. Test number 2 is math, 60 minutes. Test number 3 is reading, 35 minutes. Test number 4 is science, 35 minutes. So those are all standard time. For timing code 2, which is double time over multiple days, you see the times allowed, 90, 120, 70, and 70. We don't do writing, so I'm skipping that column. And then the rest as well. Now look at timing code 3. So timing code 3 is triple time over multiple days. So for test number 1, look at this carefully. For test number 1, it is 135 minutes or 180 minutes, and it says see note. So I'm going to go to that note in a little while. For timing code, for test number 2, it's 180 minutes. For test 3, it's 105, and so on. Okay? And then you have the others, timing code 5, 6, 7, and we don't do 8. So let's look at the note for timing code 3 that they mentioned right here. So here's the notes. So it says this: for test 1, using triple time, examinees are allowed up to 180 minutes if using text-to-speech. The computer will keep official time. Okay? Bullet number 2. When providing breaks as needed, total break time cannot exceed 90 minutes. So that's that timing code 5 that we mentioned earlier, breaks as needed, right? Single day. Keep in mind, the total break time cannot exceed 90 minutes. For timing code 6 or 7, examinees must have their tests manually timed by the room supervisor. So all of those students that have timing code 6, see all those that have timing code 6, the computer will not keep the time. The time must be kept by the room supervisor. And when we get to the room form, you're going to see where to put that time. So timing code 6 or 7, examinees must have their tests manually timed by the room supervisor. All the other timing codes, the computer will keep the official time. Okay. All right, so let's look at the next part. It says accommodations and supports roster for the ACT. We talked about that a while ago. That's this spreadsheet that I mentioned to you. All examinees authorized by ACT to use accommodations and/or EL supports on the ACT test are listed on the accommodations and support roster in Pearson Access Next. It lists each of the examinee's test name, delivery format, accommodations material kit, and timing code. For online testing, use the roster to assign students with the same timing code to test sessions. After examinees have been assigned to test sessions, the roster will list each examinee's session name. All right, so let me just mention this. I'm going to pull this back over. Notice that for this particular school, Liberty, their delivery format is paper for those accommodations. All right. In some of your schools, it may say online. Some may have a multiple. Some will say online. Some will say paper. It's whatever you chose when you uploaded that SDU file, whatever you put there. If something needs to change, we talked about how to go into PANext to change the format. And you also need to change the format in TAA as well. Okay, testing more than one examinee at a time. ACT encourages group administrations for examinees authorized for the same timing and similar accommodations and/or supports. If more than 20 examinees will test in a room, a proctor is required to assist with the administration. All examinees in the room must have the same authorized timing and must be working on the same test at the same time. When administering test 1, all examinees must be working on test 1. Designated supports. Designated supports are available to any examinee for whom a need has been identified and are approved by the test accommodations coordinator. Most require advanced planning to deliver. Examples of designated supports include, but are not limited to, testing in a small group or one-on-one, food, drink, or access to medication for examinees with medical needs, a written copy of the verbal instructions. Remember, designated supports do not have to be approved by ACT. Testing with arrangements and/or supports. You may provide select arrangements and supports for any administration if all of the following conditions are met. Arrangements are consistent with the examinee's plan on file at the school. Arrangements will not disrupt testing or provide an advantage to the examinee over other examinees. Breaks are provided as outlined in the verbal instructions. Timing is provided as outlined in the verbal instructions. The correct test materials are used for the type of administration, such as time to time. The computer is configured the same as it is for all other examinees. Allowed arrangements and supports are assigned seating, such as at the front of the room to hear verbal instructions, at a table instead of a desk. Using hearing aids, wheelchair access, testing in a quiet environment, such as small group or individual room, food, drink, or access to medication for examinees with medical needs. These examinees should test separately to avoid disturbing other examinees. A written copy of the verbal instructions, a sign language interpreter for the signing of verbal instructions. The interpreter may sign the verbal instructions to one or multiple examinees in the same room. Sign systems include American Sign Language, ASL, Sign Exact English, SEE, Conceptually Accurate Signed English, CASE, and Cued Speech. The sign language interpreter must not be a relative. Test items may not be provided. If these arrangements and or supports are provided, please submit an irregularity report explaining what was done. All right, so for these arrangements and the support that we just mentioned, they don't need ACT authorization, but if you use them, you have to provide an irregularity report. Testing examinees with hearing impairments. Examinees with hearing impairments may be able to test with standard time and use standard time materials. These allowed arrangements do not require additional staff or a separate room. Sign language interpreter. Seat an examinee using an interpreter at the front of the room. The interpreter may sign all spoken instructions, may also translate any questions from the examinee to the testing staff and sign the responses to those questions, may not translate or assign the test questions or answer any test questions for the examinee, is expected to stay in the room throughout the administration. Note, a signed language interpreter may not be a relative. And finally, assigned seating. Assign an examinee who can lip read a seat with clear view of the room supervisor. Make sure all instructions are given in sight of the examinee. Testing with accessibility supports. All examinees have access to built-in accessibility features when testing online. The use of these accessibility features does not require authorization. Accessibility features include answer eliminator, screen zooming, magnifier, line reader, answer masking, highlighter, and color contrast. So this is going to end the section on testing with accessibility supports.